Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're looking at the newly introduced Galil Ace Generation 2 rifle. Now, before we really get into the Galil Ace Gen 2, the Galil Ace, we have to go back in time. After the formation of the State of Israel, they were constantly looking to bring their industrial complex into the country. They did not want to have to rely on other countries for their armaments, especially being in the Middle East, where nothing locally was going to support them, with them being the Israeli state amongst a bunch of Arab countries. So they had constantly used FALs or guns that were provided to them from their allies. In 1972, Israel found a new rifle that they were going to manufacture in-house. The new rifle was to be based off of the Finnish RK-62 rifle. It was a much higher quality rifle than an AK, utilized a completely forged receiver, and one of the unique parts about that Finnish rifle was it had a longer sight radius, which would increase accuracy, which is something that the Israelis did want. Yisrael Galil developed what's referred to as the Galil assault rifle. This was the first completely homemade Israeli assault rifle. This rifle was designed based off of the AK design, of course the RK-62. You had a FAL type stock on it, an M16 type flash suppressor on it, but we did have a lot of differences for as far as its heft. It was a much stronger built rifle than an AK, and it was all high quality. This was not a cheap mass-produced rifle. You had a couple different versions. You had the Galil AR and the ARM rifle. This is basically the ARM rifle. This was a heavier built rifle. We have a bipod. Of course, we have our famous bottle opener in the bottom. We have a heavier 21-inch barrel. And we can see we have our longer sights. Also, we can notice here the charging handle. The charging handle was designed so you'd be able to take any hand and go over the top and cock it back. So you'd have to have these flipping your arm around the rifle movements you see people do with AKs. You can just put it on the top of the rifle, pull back, and release. Now this rifle here, very, very well made. Very, very heavy, but very, very short service life. And the primary reason for that short service life was the cost. At the time these rifles were being introduced, the United States military, United States government was giving them quite a bit of foreign military aid. And that foreign military aid came in the way of M16A1 rifles. And those M16A1 rifles were, in fact, they were so plentiful that it did not make sense to go into the production and the full cost of building this rifle. And as time would go on, you would have foreign military sales where the Israeli government would buy rifles from the U.S. government or from Colt directly, and it was still significantly cheaper than building the Galil rifle. Now, again, this was a very accurate rifle. It was a very durable rifle, as we're going to see from the shooting footage. Firing from a 35-round steel magazine, it was as robust could be. You couldn't look at this rifle and really find any fault with it, really, other than weight. And what really came to the demise of this rifle was sheerly one thing: it was economics. It just wasn't. It just was too expensive to manufacture. Now, you would see this rifle go on to be used in other countries, such as Colombia, such as South Africa, just to name a couple. There were quite a few of these used in South America. So there were places that were licensed to produce this rifle. So it did see service. There was no question. It did see service. It just didn't see much with the Israeli government. So we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at this rifle, because to understand the Galil Ace series, you need to really understand what the standard Galil really was. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the magazine. Now, this is a proprietary magazine, and it is steel. You could pound nails with this. This is an extremely durable magazine. They started off with a 35-round magazine versus going with a 30. So as you can see from the stock here, you had the ability to fold the stock. Again, it was a fail type stock. And considering the fact that a lot of the urban environments that the Israelis were fighting in Israel, you did require something that was a little bit more compact. So the rifle could be deployed and fired like this as well. Now, for as far as the rear sights were concerned, you did have a flip-up sight in the rear and the front, which would contain tritium vials. Now, these are long since died out, these tritium vials, but they did come with the ability to have flip-up night sights. Now, instead of having the standard blade-type sight of the AK, this had peep sights of the M16, which are much more accurate sights, much more easy to get longer range, and they're much easier to hold a proper sight placement. You notice we have one handguard here instead of the traditional top and bottom. That was another thing. There's also a big heat shield in here that we'll see once we get this thing apart. Now, the gas tube is on top, and as you can see from the bipod basically we pinch, pull out, and open up. Now, of course, that can be taken on and off, as you so chose. But this did allow you to have that ability for a more durable, sturdy platform. You did have an oversized magazine paddle compared to that of the standard AK, which again, much more with the finish type version. The trigger was that of an AK, but it was a much more, it was a much better trigger. It was much less creep to it. It was much more of a smooth type trigger. Again, this whole rifle was made on a whole different playing field than that of the standard AK. Now, for disassembly, I will say this is the one area where these rifles are not fun, because it's easy to get them apart, but it's not as easy to get them back together because you have a really extended tab here, which locks the top of the receiver cover in place. So one of the things you will notice here, you have a reinforced rib right here that goes around the back of the receiver cover, and this gives you a very tight fit, so you have the return to zero, so you can get more precision accuracy out of this. However, this makes it much more difficult to put it back together. So first we're going to do is we're going to push this in, and we're going to lift off the receiver cover. Now, as you can see, the receiver cover, the sight's part of it, and now we can get a little bit of a closer look at that rear sight as well. You do have two different apertures as well. So next thing you do, we have our standard recoil spring. This is very AK-like, as you can see. Then we just pull our bolt right out. Now, the one thing you'll see a little bit different on here is you'll see these different lugs in the rear here. Now, these are basically scraper lugs. They do try to keep the inside of the gas tube cleaner. And you look at your bolt. Basically, it's a 5.56 millimeter AK bolt. The gas tube now comes right out. And this is as far as you would go for cleaning. And now the handguards came both in wood and in polymer, so you could get them either way. Most of the Galil ARs came with a polymer type handguard, and the standard ARM rifles came here with this kind of a wood handguard. Very nice handguard. And when you take a look into the trigger mechanism in here, you'll see it's standard AK with one big difference. That big difference being is you have on the side here a ambidextrous safety. And what that does is it just lifts that safety up and down. So you'd have safe and you'd have fire. But of course, with the military version, you would have a safe, semi, and an auto. And those are some of the really special features of the Galil rifle. So for reassembly, it reassembles like any other AK does. First, we're going to drop our gas tube back in, and that slides into 2 notches. Now we will go ahead and drop our carrier group in, our recoil spring. This is where it can get a little bit tricky. There's a little trick that I use that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, but due to the fact you have such a long tab on that back of this can be quite difficult. And there we have it. So the next version would come out would be the Galil Ace, which would be a completely modernized Galil. Now, it's very interesting when you look at the history of this because I spent some time in Colombia a few different occasions at a company there called Indomil. And if you talk to Indomil, they were the designers of the Galil Ace, not the Israelis. So I'm going to leave that argument up to the Colombians versus the Israelis because I don't want to go there. But they were the first ones to adopt this rifle. Now, as we can see, we have a completely modernized look. Look, we have a good cold hammer forged barrel, continuous 1913 rail, polymer lower handguards. The bottom for weight reduction is polymer. And then, of course, this particular one is in 7.62 by 39. The Galil Aces, like the Galils, were offered in both 5.56 as well as 7.62 NATO. However, the Galil Ace introduced a 7.62 by 39. This is my personal rifle. I had tested all three, the 5.56, the 7.62, and the 308. And for me, this happened to be my favorite caliber, so this is the one that I kept. This probably represents the Cadillac of AKs. It's just absolutely gorgeous. I found very, very few shortcomings in it. So it takes any magazine that you want to put into it. Now the 5.56 version was sort of like the Galil version of the 308 in the fact that there was two magazines. Now for the Galil and for the 5.56 and the 308, they used proprietary Israeli magazines. When the Galil Ace was first developed, it utilized those same magazines. For instance, the ones that are in service with the Colombian Army, for instance, use the traditional Galil magazines. They were also designed and more commonly accepted using the Stenag AR-15 magazines. And for as far as the 308 was concerned, the original ones used the original Israeli magazines, and the later generations used the there's no Stenag. Later generations used the 308 SR25 type magazines. So you did have a couple different magazine options for both the 5.56 and 308 7.62 NATO option. But of course the AK utilized this. So you also had an improved stock. This is a telescopic side folding stock, so you could go adjustable rear. You also have a rear cheek riser on here that will pop off. You need a little tool to pop that off, but this is for use with the optic. As you see, it's set up here. And of course you have side folding, and the side folding stock, even with the riser on it, will still will function properly. So you have a lighter weight side folding stock, telescopic. Now, you do notice there is a difference in the bolt carrier. There's no handle on the top because, again, you see people have to do all this kind of garbage with the AKs and all that. There's a better way, and that better way was the utilization of a cocking handle on the left-hand side. Now, one of the interesting things about the way they handled this, they did the same type of a dust cover that you'd see on the FNC. So as you would pull back, you would see how this dust cover would come down, then it would engage. So what this does, this gets rid of the AK's weak link. Weak link of the AKs was when you had the safety down, or selector down, you had a complete entrance for dirt, garbage to get into, which I don't care how reliable your action is. Once your trigger mechanism gets gummed up, it's not going to work. So they made this an entirely enclosed system. So it was designed specifically to keep all that dirt out. And again, we have our same safety on the side here. The front sight, as it comes, is a post front sight, and it does have a tritium insert on the top. So you do have the ability to have night sights. Now, you have basically two parts to this sight. You have the bottom adjustment, which is for elevation. And then the top one is so you can spin it around so you can have either the tritium in your line of sight or out of your line of sight, so you can make that choice. You go back to the rear here, you have a much more simplistic rear sight than you do that on the Galil. You have a large and a small aperture. Now, again, you do have the same kind of takedown, but we're going to take this thing apart and you can see some other interesting parts of this rifle. So very similar to that of its original. And this one is a lot tighter. So as you can see, you have your feed tray cover, your rear sight. Just like its original, you have some kind of AK recoil mechanism. Now this does come with two recoil buffers. You have a recoil buffer here, and you have one in the rear, which is this is more of a gasket sealer to keep dirt and everything out of the rear. But you have a recoil buffer. Is this necessary on here? No, but it does make certainly a big difference. This rifle's had a couple thousand rounds through it, and I see no wear at all on the recoil buffer. So now we pull our bolt carrier group out. Now, when we look at the bolt carrier group, it's basically identical to what we had before, but we have this handle on here instead of the handle on the other side. Rotate that out, and we have standard AK style a bolt, same as the original one. And of course, this is the same here. This is nice chrome plating on here also. And just like the original, your gas tube comes right out, and of course, you see your 1913 rail on top of that. Now, what we also have in here are heat shields. So those heat shields will help reflect heat and keep it off of the shooter's hand. We also have on here removable panels. We have removable panels here, so we have 1913 rails. So this will enable us to put any kind of flashlight, laser, vertical pistol grip, anything that you would want to put on here. Now these are polymer. Now there are other companies who make different kinds of front rails for this, which is you can get as well. But this shows you the modularity. So this is your stripped down rifle. Now when you take a look into the trigger mechanism, this is a much nicer trigger than that of the original Galil. This does have one downfall for as far as I was concerned, and perhaps that's because of the size of my finger. The bottom of the trigger digs into my trigger finger. That was probably one of the only problems I ever had with this trigger, because it's a gorgeous trigger. It's just the way that it feels, the way it digs into my finger, which is something that will be addressed in the next generation rifle. But the rifle that we see here is based off of the military rifle, the one that's being used in service, Vietnam and several other countries, as well as Chile. Chile was interesting because while I was working for Colt, Chile has been going through a weapons replacement program for God knows how long. They had their original STIG 550s that they were manufactured in Chile. And one of the unique aspects about the Chilean government is they want all their weapons manufactured in country. They don't want to either rely on anybody else to manufacture. So any weapon that they would choose, they would have to manufacture in-house. So at Colt, we had brought some guns over there. They have their own Picatinny arsenal over there, which is where I was working with, and we delivered a whole bunch of guns there, and they wanted to do some inspections, which we did. And one of the things that we noticed was it was extremely impressive. They had everything that we would have like at Picatinny. They had everything that you would need for testing, accuracy device, computers, programs, I mean, everything that you would need. However, the rifles that we were showing were specifically for special operations use, not for the entire replacement program. Well, as they were going through looking at a lot of different weapons, they had decided upon the Galil Ace. And their manufacturing firm there is called FAMI, and that's where they manufacture everything. So what Israel did was they set up FAMI to be able to manufacture the Galil Ace rifles for the Chilean military. So that was one of the places that this rifle was adopted. And this version you see here in 7.62x39 was adopted by the Republic of Vietnam as their main service rifle. And this exact same format you would see here, because they have a significant amount of 7.62x39 ammunition, and they have a significant amount of AK magazines. So they wanted something that was going to be modernized, much better, but compatible with what they already had. So there are some rather large militaries who've gone to this. The only thing that this commercial rifle is missing pretty much is the bayonet lug on here. But the success has been mostly in the 5.56 variants for military use. I do believe Vietnam is probably the only one who utilizing it in 7.62x39. So for reassembly, we just slide these right back on. Slides back on like so. Take our gas tube. It slides into the notches in the rear of the receiver. Just like an AK. Receiver cover. And again, this is extremely tight because it wants that return to zero, especially with the 1913 rail. There you have it. We're going to take this to the range and we're going to put a few rounds through it. So the major features we have with the Galil Ace is this particular rifle, 7.62 by 39, weighs about 7.5 pounds, 60-inch cold hammer forged barrel, 1/9.45-inch twist, six lines and grooves, chromoly vanadium, has an overall length of 34.5 inches unfolded, and he has a side-folded telescopic stock, lowers polymer, left side charging handle, reciprocating. FN type receiver dust cover, 5.56 millimeter, 7.62 by 39, as well as 7.62 by 51. So now we enter 2021 with the introduction of the new Galil Ace Gen 2. Now looking at the Galil Ace Gen 2, we've gotten away from the military look and we're now more into the commercial look. And what the commercial market is looking for is, as we see here in the handguard, we're looking at an M-lock free floated barrel handguard. We have, of course, we still have the full 1913 rail on the top. And we have the same basic system for as far as the barrel type as we do on the original Galil Ace Gen 1. This particular one here happens to be the 5.56 millimeter instead of the 7.62 by 39 millimeter. And we're going to see that we do have a few differences on here. But starting from the front, again, we have the same chromoly vanadium barrel. This is a 1 7-inch twist, cold hammer forged barrel. Now we have a handguard here, which is around 15 inches. It is M-lock. So, you know, the modern American shooter can add anything that they want to it. I'm unaware of any military contracts that have gone with this kind of a handguard. Again, I think this rifle here was taking the military version and putting it more towards what the commercial market would be asking for. Now, again, with the 5.56, this is the same as the Gen 1. You have the polymer lower receiver. Taking Stenag magazines. Again, this rifle here was designed also to take the original Galil magazines as well. But for especially the commercial version, they wanted to use the standard U.S. mil-spec type or Stenag magazines. So looking at the lower receiver here, it's polymer as the original ones were. The difference is, this is the first version that would have a bolt catch. You lift upward, and that would lock the bolt open to the rear, push down, it will release. So this was one of the changes. Another change that they made was they made some modifications to make the safety a lot lower profile as they were on the originals. Now it's still easy to get to with your right hand, and also with your left thumb. You can go either way. Your magazine releases on the front. Now the stock. This is where it gets a little bit interesting because this again shows the interest in the American market. We have a standard M16 AR-15 type receiver extension on here, which is side folding. So you have a side folding telescopic stock, which is an AR-15. Now this is significantly larger than that of the original. I have to say I do like the original stock a little bit better because it is a little bit thinner and it's a little bit more compact. But this is what the American market would want. This is what the American market would demand. They want the ability for everything to take an AR-15 stock because of the fact that this stock here, you have multiple versions. So whatever you want, you will be able to have. So that makes sense. Now is the single most important feature that I see on this rifle is the change of the trigger. I mentioned to you earlier that one of the problems that I had with the Galil Ace was the fact that the way the trigger was, the end of the trigger impacted it and it cut into the tip of my finger. They corrected that. We have a much longer trigger now. For me, if I could have this trigger on my Galil Ace, I would be 100% satisfied. Now, the difference between me and some of your average shooters is I like the ones that are rifles that are more military. So for me, of course, I'm going to tend to like the Galil Ace Gen 1 a little bit better just because of the fact that I like the original military configuration. However, for this is intended market, meaning the U.S. commercial market, this rifle here is on spot. It has the 1913 rail, it has the free float, it has the addition of the bolt catch, it has these major improvements, and of course the trigger. When we look at this rifle, it's very, very similar in every way to the other one. You have the same kind of disassembly. We push in, and this one was extremely tight. Of course, do you have a receiver cover? We do have the Vortex Spitfire optic on here, which this optic here is ideal for this type of a rifle for as far as a 420 power and the range which you would be shooting this one at. It's ideal. Push in and lift out. Now, just like the 7.62 by 39 Gen 1, you have the same recoil buffer on the back, and you have the same gasket on the front. Pulls right out. Now, you will also notice that the parts on the Gen 1s and the Gen 2s, you do have some slight modifications to the bolt carrier. The bolt carrier has been lightened up significantly. But oddly enough, these parts are interchangeable, the Gen 1s and the Gen 2s. So if you have an operating rod and bolt assembly, they will function intermittent between the two. But the parts on the Galil Ace Gen 2 have been lightened up slightly. Pull the bolt right out. And like the original, you can slide the gas tube right out. Of course, this slides underneath the handguard. So overall, it's very, very similar to the original one. The trigger, as I said, it made all the difference to me in the world, the way they swapped out this trigger. Having that longer trigger on there, I could shoot this one for hours and days without a problem. The other one, it would eventually fatigue me to the point where I would have some little bit of aching on my finger. But when you look at the quality of these IWI rifles, they're impeccable. And that's, again, why I will tell you, I believe they are literally the Cadillac of the AKs. This version here shows you a way of modernizing an AK rifle to the current wants and the current needs of the market. You don't see any other AK type rifles out there that are this adaptable to what the commercial market would want. So for reassembly, same as we do with the other ones. We're going to drop our gas tube back in. This is going to be a little bit more difficult because you can't see it as well. Drop in like so. You just got to guide that in with your finger. Hold it in place. We're going to take our bolt carrier. Reassemble. Recoil spring assembly. Again, we're going to use a little bit of a trick here. It's going to rest that right on the tip there. So we can drop our handguard on there. Hooks underneath. Again, this is a quite tight fit in here. This is why you get the retention. And there we have it. So what we're going to do is go out to the range. We're going to see how this one shoots. So with our overall length here, we're looking at 39 inches with a stock extended, 36 with it collapsed. 16-inch cold hammer forged chrome alloy vanadium barrel, chrome plated, with an MSRP of $18.99. So there you have it. You have the original Galil, the Gen 1, and the Gen 2. The Gen 2 has seen more military service, obviously, than any version. The Gen 2 is still brand new, but the Gen 1 continues to serve major militaries throughout the world. If you were looking for a rifle that potentially could be competition, 3-gun competition, where you could add all your amenities on here, this is certainly the gun for you. I do hope to see IWI release this trigger as an upgrade for those of us who have the earlier Gen 1s, because what a difference that it makes as far as being able to shoot for somebody, especially, I guess, who has big fingers like me. We also like to thank Challenge Targets. Challenge Targets is a company who has provided us with some steel targets. We do have a promotional code on there as well for SAS, so you can have 10% off of all their steel targets. I have to say that this is one of the changes that we had made over the last few months to our channel. People have said they want to see a little bit more interesting aspects to our shooting, and it's done that. I have to say the steel targets have made a major difference. They're a lot funner for us to do because you get that direct feedback. And the targets I've got right now, I probably got 15,000 rounds on the pistol target and probably close to 10,000 rounds on the rifle targets. They hold up quite well. So if any of you guys are in the market for any steel targets, check out Challenge Targets and look at our code at SAS to save you 10%. And I do hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share. Thank you.